guys, today I'm going to show you how to take a HDR panorama. So the sun's dropped below the hill here, so we're getting some nice light. A lot of people make the mistake when they come out for sunset that once the sun's dropped below the horizon they go home. The best colours and the best light comes after the sun has dropped. So we're here at Cranky Corner Road and we're shooting some mountains, and I want to get a full panorama within a couple of images, but I also want to shoot HDR. So the first thing you want to do is put your camera into bracketing mode and shoot 7 exposures, all at one stop, varying ranges, and then you just make your way through the scene in increments. So using your focal point, make a marker, shoot those images. There'll be 7 of them as we're shooting bracketed exposures. And then make your way onto the next shot. Now you want to move fast and you don't want to waste any time because the light's changing so quickly that if you take your time you'll end up with different light within each image. So this is a particularly lengthy process and it'll involve a lot of editing, so you've really got to be committed to the shot. We've got our shots now, so we're going to head back home and I'm going to show you how to merge them and blend them in Photoshop. Alright, so we're in here in Lightroom and we've got our images. So the panorama starts here and then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it's the next frame in the panorama. Now as we make our way along the timeline we can see that there's a number of shots involved there. So we'll go from the beginning, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the first 7 shots and I'm going to go photo merge HDR. Now the great thing about Lightroom CC is it now allows us to merge HDRs in the program without having to go externally into Photoshop or something like Photomatic. So it's just going to take a little while to process a preview of that. So there we go, we have our first HDR. Now you want auto align ticked. Now this just allows for if the camera had some movement, say you weren't shooting on a tripod. I always have it ticked. You're going to want auto tone ticked, otherwise it's very flat. Now if you had moving things within your images such as people, birds, traffic, you're going to want a higher amount of deghosting. Basically it just looks at the frame and finds the moving objects and just removes as much blur and ghosting as it can. Because there were no moving parts to this image, just having none is fine. So I'm going to click merge now and it's going to merge those 7 images together, and I'm going to move again now down the line to the next 7 images. So there's the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Select them and you can visually see when the next one starts. You go from light to dark, so those 7 are selected. It's the same process again. Now literally just a few months ago, before the release of Lightroom CC, I would spend about an hour putting together HDRs ready for a panorama, but now that Lightroom CC has the HDR function inbuilt and I don't have to go somewhere like Photomatic to merge my HDRs, it has streamlined my workflow. Alright, so here are our 5 HDRs that we just blended. So you're going to select all of them. Now if you do have Lightroom CC, you can go to photo merge and go panorama. That'll work, but assuming that you don't have Lightroom, I'm going to do this in Photoshop with you because you're more than likely going to have Photoshop. So we're going to go to edit in, merge to panorama in Photoshop. That's going to launch Photoshop. Alright, so we're here in photo merge in Photoshop CC. Now this function is in CS6 and CS5 I believe. I'm not sure about versions after that. Now I always select blend the images together, I always select vignette removal, I always select geometric distortion correction, but I don't select content aware fill in the transparent areas. Basically, if there are transparent areas, which there normally is, I'll either crop in or I will use the clone tool and manually do it. I just find that I can do a better job than what the computer can do at the moment. So once you've got all that selected, you can select OK, and it's going to merge them together. Now, depending on how many shots you've got, this could take anywhere to 3 minutes to sort of 20, half an hour. Alright, so here's the final output panorama that Photoshop's done a very nice job of blending together. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to merge the layers. And then I'm going to crop in just until those transparent areas are gone. Of course, you could recover those areas by using the clone tool, but I'm not particularly interested in doing that since I already like the frame that I've got. And there we go, there's a very nice panorama. So this is a raw, basically a raw image. Other than the HDR blending, there's no editing done to them yet. So now I'm going to bring this image back into Lightroom. Right, so we're back here in Lightroom now with the panorama, and we're going to make some adjustments to the image. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the contrast and pump that up a bit. And bring down the highlights slightly. There's no real need to, since we have done a HDR. I'm going to bring up the shadows. I'm going to pump up the whites. Hold down the Alt key until the whites start peaking. You want to be just before that. That looks nice. And do the same with the black. Hold down the Alt key until the blacks start peaking. Now you can see the current blacks that are peaking are just trees. I'm not worried about them, so I'm quite happy to have them pitch black. Alright, I'm not going to do anything with the clarity. I'm going to go to the vibrance. I'm going to pump that up a bit. 12. I'm going to pump the saturation a little bit. Not too much. +6 is perfectly fine. You don't want to pump up the saturation too much. So we're going to come to the sharpening. Now you don't want to go all the way. Maybe I think 100 will do nicely. And we're going to come down to the lens corrections. Now I'm not going to worry about profile corrections, I don't think. I'm definitely going to remove chromatic aberrations. That's always a must on these sort of HDRs. HDRs are notorious for having a lot of chromatic aberration. Alright, now I'm going to grab a graduated filter and I'm going to drag that down. And we're going to turn down the exposure a little bit. Pump the contrast, bring down the highlights, pump the shadows, bring up the whites, turn the blacks down the slightest bit, bring the saturation up a little bit. I'm now done with that. And now we're going to have a play with these mountains. So I'm going to get a nice big brush and we're going to have auto mask selected, and I'm just going to paint these mountains and we'll just see what's going on there. We'll turn up the exposure a little bit, pump the contrast, bring up the saturation, and we'll have a little play with the tint here. That looks nice, and pump up the warmth a little bit, and that looks good. Alright, so now we're going to come down to the color selections, and you're probably going to be set to hue as the default. You want to go to all. So we're going to have a look at the reds in the image and how we can affect them. So if we pump them to the minus, you can see that we can change the reds to a nicer pink. I think we'll do that, maybe 15%. Minus 15, I should say. And now we'll have a play with the oranges, which is the main color in this sunset. And I'm going to bring it down a bit. Going to come to the yellows. Let's have a play with them. I think I'm going to be on the plus side with the yellows, maybe 20%. Have a play with the greens. +4. There's no real aquas in the image, so I'll set that back to 0. I've skipped the blues because there's no blues in there. Now you can see off in the mountains over here that there's some purple tinge that we can play with. I'm going to turn that down and then come to the magenta and play with that. It's working in the same area. +16 will do. Alright, now we get to play with the saturation, so we're going to bring up those reds a bit. Bring up the oranges, and I'm happy to leave that there. All the other colors, I'm quite happy with how vibrant they are. I really only want to play with the sunset. Other than that, I'm going to go to the spot removal, and I'm going to hold down the space bar and zoom in on some sensor spots that I'm seeing. And I'm just going to remove them. It may have also been dust on the lens, but I'm going to assume that they're sensor spots. You can see one over here. It's important to make your way around your image and definitely have a look for these before you start, before you're ready to export the panorama, because you don't want to be selling and printing out images with sensor spots on them. It looks very amateur and basic. Alright, that looks pretty good to me. I think that's done. So we'll have a look at where we started here. Not a huge amount of difference. We've definitely given it a kick. You can definitely notice the difference in the saturation and the contrast. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can find me on Facebook at ManDownPhotography, on Instagram at ManDownPhotography, and on Snapchat at ManDownPhoto. Thanks for watching.